an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Hello and welcome from us. Our time this week is devoted largely to policing and security. Has the Paris attack seriously curtailed the Chancellor's option to cut the Met's budget? And even if it has, will he still signal the end of the police community support officer in London? Here with me this week, David Lammy, Labour MP for Tottenham, and Victoria Borwick, Conservative MP for Kensington, until recently one of the Deputy Mayors of London, the statutory Deputy Mayor for London. And as an added bonus, we have an elected Police and Crime Commissioner with us. Surrey's Kevin Hurley, welcome to you. And someone who was once head of counter-terrorism at the City, of course. So you've seen at both ends as a politician, and we'll come on to that. Let's have a quick word straight away about the warnings to the Home Secretary at the end of the week that the response to terror attacks would be severely affected by big cuts in numbers. Kevin, that was focusing on how how we'd respond if the attack, like in Paris, happened, whether you could mobilise. It was warning you couldn't mobilise enough people. Is that your view and your perspective as someone who presumably the Met would call on straight away to provide officers?
Well, of course, my residents all work in London, so it's directly relevant. But I think I come at this from probably three key points. Because of the insecurities of our borders, where a large number of people still come in, not so concerned about them, but their body spaces, each one takes up 10 AK-47 rifles like they used over there, or 70 kilos of explosive. 25 of them the other day jumped out on a truck at Cluckett's Lane. On the M25, how many guns could that have been? That's one issue. The next one is the cuts are really starting to make serious inroads into police community support officers and neighbourhood officers up and down the country. And of course, we can talk about the firearms response. I mean, what on earth are we doing in this day and age, where 100 years after the First World War, we're still sending single-shot riflemen to a machine gun fight?
Well, what does that mean when you say single shot?
Well, police weaponry around the whole country with the armed response vehicles consists of a high-quality rifle that's been deliberately downgraded to fire single shots based on the old rationale of police deployments of single-aim shots. We're now in a situation where you need to immediately challenge the terrorists in the midst of massacre, and the only way you can do that, and if you like, it's my military background comes in here, you have to suppress their fire by firing more back, assault them to save people.
But let's back to that central point. If these attacks, something similar happened in London tomorrow, would there be enough resources, would there be enough officers to respond to it?
There would be, broadly speaking, officers able of responding to it. There's some very good people. The issue is, what's the level of their weaponry, and could they maintain the kind of resilience that we're seeing right across France? In my judgment, no. OK, well, let's just move on. Let's get on to the politics at this time. At Prime Minister's Questions this week, the Labour leader asked if the budget for community policing would be protected, and the Prime Minister said this.
Neighbourhood policing numbers have gone up by 3,800. In the capital city, we've seen a 500% increase in neighbourhood policing. We've also, because we've cut bureaucracy, put the equivalent of an extra 2,000 police on the streets.
David Lammy. Pretty robust response from the PM.
Yeah, and politicians don't say this lightly, but I'm afraid he misled the House. Numbers in neighbourhood policing have fallen by 5,700. Anyone across London will tell you. If there's a blue light, the police will turn up. But if it's at the neighbourhood level, decimated, not there. PCSO's gone, and they were very much the new ethnic minority officers coming through. Neighbourhood teams stripped back, overstretched. He's living on cloud cuckoo land. Neighbourhood policing has all but vanished.
Victoria Borwick, were you there at the time when he said those figures? Did you recognise those figures?
I can only say this from my experience at the GLA. The wonderful thing is that Met is about the one borough, the one larger borough, the London-wide borough, that hasn't actually had its police cuts. I mean, despite other...
Absolutely, but did you recognise those figures that he gave there? Did you recognise that picture?
We have said to the Met that they must be able to choose how they allocate their policing. There has been, I mean, the wonderful thing is that we've now got neighbourhood policing, where we've now got a different system. We haven't now got, in the Ken Livingstone day, 2 people here and 2 people there, which might have meant that a high street split the people in the middle. But let's not go into the detail here. What we're talking about here is making London
Let's get on to the
safe.
detail in a second. Hang on a second. In 2010, he was saying, there were just 800 community police officers, neighbourhood policing officers. Were there 800 neighbourhood policing officers in 2010?
I can't remember exactly that year and exactly that figure. I can't go...
It might help you, because that was the year when police got to the highest number ever, 33,000.
Yes, I was about to say, but in total there were 33,000.
But he was saying there were 800 at that time that were dedicated to neighbourhood policing, and somehow that has gone up now to 5,000 dedicated neighbourhood policing 5 years later.
Well,
David Lammy says the actual trend's been the other way.
Well, that's the point about the actual system. Every area now has got an inspector and 2 people neighbourhood policing below them. So every area has got dedicated police that aren't going to go off and to be called into, running around other things to happen in London.
But I'm just wondering...
But I mean, I think what we're really here talking about is making London safe at a very vulnerable time.
But again, I'm just wondering about these figures. We knew there was a kind of, not a golden age, but we know that lots of money was put into neighbourhood policing up to 2008, 2009, 2010.
Well, then we saw great strength, of course, during the Olympics, where again we proved that London is safe, London's a welcoming city, and London is where it's safe for visitors, and Londoners...
I'll tell you what, at this stage, you'll say you're very happy with the current level of neighbourhood policing, and you don't think it will go down after the comprehensive spending.
No, what I'm saying is that actually there may be changes, but it is up to the Met to decide operational policing of who should be where. We've just heard, if there's a threat, that's what we've got to respond to. We've all heard we've got to obviously increase our counter-terrorism spending, we've got to increase the armed response, we've got to relook at the other things that we're putting out, the vehicles. But the the Commissioner has already said that all those things are now under review. It is not for me or any of us to sit here to say exactly how many police there should be on every street corner.
Can I just ask Kevin very quickly, and from your knowledge of London, of course it may tip into your feelings about Surrey as well. Did you recognise that? I mean, the Prime Minister was actually saying that the number of neighbourhood policing had gone up across the country.
9 members of my family were or are members of the Metropolitan Police. I've got lots of friends at the highest levels in there. I know on a daily basis things that people tell me that they are not anywhere near where they once were, and officers at the grassroots level, whether it's on response or CID officers, are overwhelmed. The neighbourhood officers are continually failing to meet appointments for the public because they're being cut. And Surrey, which is right next to us, the richest county in the country, are going to lose 400 members of staff on our current financial plan. That's 10% of our workforce.
Now, Victoria, you mentioned helpfully that there are big choices to make, and let's try and bury down into that, whether it's going to be armed police or that kind of specialism, or indeed police community support officers. Now, police community support officers were introduced several years ago to help provide that reassuring, visible presence that people seem to want in their neighbourhoods. Eyes and ears, you often heard it said. But Andrew Cryan now reports on their steady demise and possible imminent extinction in the capital.
The height of the New Labour years. Britain is introduced to the Community Support Officer, also known as the PCSO.
It's not just jam tomorrow, it's protection today.
London was the first place in the country to have them. They were invested with some of the powers of full police officers, but not all. So they can direct traffic and pedestrians, remove abandoned vehicles, issue fixed penalty notices such as for dog fouling, graffiti or littering, to demand a name and address of someone acting in an antisocial way, and the power to seize drugs. But what they don't have is the power to arrest. But after next week's comprehensive spending review, Scotland Yard are set to decide on the future of the Community Support Officer. One of the options on the table, some people say, means the end of PCSOs as we know them. Some think the view from Scotland Yard could be that other things are more important.
The Met is facing such drastic budget cuts that the Commissioner has said that one possibility is to cut all PCSOs in the capital. I think that would be a detrimental effect. The Commissioner himself says they are the eyes and ears of policing in the community, and I think that's a vital intelligence policing resource that we can't afford to lose.
Following the tragic events in Paris last weekend, there's been much discussion about how London could cope in a similar situation. The Met Police have said that they want more armed officers. The government has promised nearly 2,000 new intelligence and security officers. So with other priorities, does it mean that the community support officers stand even less chance of surviving? Former Met Police Commissioner Ian Blair has warned that he thinks it would be a mistake.
I think it would be a disaster, absolute disaster, because in the end, it's intelligence from the community that will lead us to stop attacks happening. And it is those patrolling PCSOs who get to know the communities, who work with the communities. This is policing with communities, not at communities.
But if the choice is community support officers or fully warranted police, some say it should be a simple decision.
For the organisation, of course there's been some benefit. You know, they provide a role and a backup for warranted police officers. I wouldn't decry that for 1 minute, but they are not warranted police officers and they don't perform the same role of a warranted police officer. That is very straightforward. That has always been our position. They're part of the family and they do a blooming good job. I'm not going to stand here and say they don't. But when we're talking about cutting our numbers and cutting policing, that to me would be the first thing to cut before you started talking about warranted officers.
But before writing the obituary of the community support officer, it's worth considering that the cuts coming down the line might not be as apocalyptic as some people are making out.
So, Victoria Borick, so back in 2010, there were about 4,500 police community support officers. Now there are 1,000. We hear the suggestion they might go. Disposable, should they go? Or if the choice is between a PCSO and a real police officer, what do you do?
I think the important thing is I think it's extremely unlikely that we're going to see under the current situation, as we have seen over the last weeks, that policing is going to be cut. Exactly how the cuts will come or how the changes will come, I think it's up to the Commissioner to decide with the Mayor and the Home Secretary. I mean, certainly Boris has always gone on record as saying he would rather they were not cut, but obviously the new decisions have to be made now as a result of the terrible, terrible bombings we've seen in Paris.
Even if we can't make sense of the claims and the figures, the claims are being made about neighbourhood policing over the last few years in London, David Lammy, do you accept that the trajectory and the way Boris Johnson and his deputy Stephen Greenhalgh have replaced PCSOs with police officers available for the front line is the better of the two options?
But they haven't. You speak to shopkeepers about how often they're seeing community support officers at neighbourhood level. They're not. You ask the mosque, you ask the synagogue, you ask the schools. Those officers are vanishing, they are going. That is why, actually, very sadly, knife crime is spiking, because the officers aren't there to know the young people, to be in the community centres and the youth centres. That's what's happening. And this move will bring us back to where we were when we had the riots.
But you know,
public order officers had disappeared across London. We need 2,500 from the rest of the country to actually police London. That is what this is. Very, very serious. And the Conservatives are playing politics. They're redesignating language. They're fixing the numbers. The truth is the numbers are falling. 1.3 billion taken out of the budget. It's got to fall somewhere.
Even if they were redefining the neighbourhood policing or whatever, people also want to be able to see a doctor when they want to see them. They also need to have their children educated in schools. They need to be able to get into work, transport. All these departments are facing financial pressures as well. The Home Office, the police have to do the same, don't they?
You decide where your priorities are. I think there are issues around efficiency and IT. However, when we had riots, we need 2,500 from the rest of the country. We are facing very, very serious pressures in relation to terrorism and intelligence. This is absolutely not the time to strip away that neighbourhood level where the intelligence actually
One thing, let me
from.
bring Kevin in for the sort of front line, sort of. What have you done with PCSOs in Surrey?
What we've done, we've lost some of them, but the real key thing is we're reducing by 400 staff by losing all the support staff who do the interviewing of the prisoners, the case processing. So what that means with the uniform officers, rather than being out in the neighbourhoods, they're now going to be spending hours and hours back in the police station. We are now spinning the wheel right back to the police officers getting immersed right into the bureaucracy. My view is the government have made a very big mistake in cutting police as far as they already have done, because it's security that underpins the economy that enables the Chancellor to make the taxes. We need to think of this, if nothing else, as an economic decision.
And don't you agree with that? Final word on this section?
I think the important thing is we all know that counter-terrorism is not going to get cut this week. The Prime Minister's gone on record and said that, the Home Secretary has gone on record and saying that, and so has Bernard Hogan-Howe. We must keep London safe, our capital safe, the rest of the country safe.
Still to be hotly debated.
What resources are you going to put back into the borders then? How much more are you going to build the border agency back up?
Oh my God! Oh, Kevin,
Well,
you think you're going to take us
Schengen-
down that territory on the
Schengen
limited
is now
time we have?
dead.
No, it's the same thing, isn't it? It's the same thing.
And it's
it's
one-
all part of the package.
And it's one for another day. Thanks very much indeed.